Half of you are so afraid of the NRA. We have to fight them every once in a while. That's okay.
Republicans are defying the NRA while Democrats are pressing for more.
We will not bow down. We won't bow down.
Change is coming, and we'll show you what to expect, what it will cost, and where the state will find the money with our special guest, House Speaker Richard Corcoran.
Whatever it takes for us to make sure this never happens again, we're going to do it.
And as they decide whether teachers should carry guns, Vanessa Ruffes meets the private school staffers who are already armed. She takes a closer look at how their training compares to law enforcement.
Nice, smooth trigger presses.
Plus, new polling gives Democrats a slight edge in the race for governor, but the candidates in both parties have the same problem. We'll break it all down on Money, Power, and Politics. Right now, state lawmakers are redirecting hundreds of millions of dollars into school safety, and they're planning to change school policy and mental health policy and gun policy. But if they really want to prevent mass shootings, they also have to address the striking failures in our government.
We need more idiot control.
Yes, Senator Kennedy says we need more idiot control because see something, say something has been drilled into our heads, and people in Parkland saw things and they said things over and over again for years. The Broward Sheriff's Office took at least 23 calls relating to the future school shooter and his home, and that's just the start. For example, more than 2 years ago, a caller told a deputy the future school shooter threatened to shoot up the school. The deputy passed it along to the school resource officer. 7 months later, a peer counselor told the school resource officer that the future school shooter was cutting himself, seeking guns, and possibly drinking gasoline. The mental health counselor did not want to commit him. 5 days later, DCF noted the fresh cuts on his arm and other red flags and determined the future school shooter was stable. 1 year later, a tipster warned the FBI that the future school shooter posted that he wanted to be, quote, a professional school shooter on YouTube. The FBI, though, could not identify the future school shooter, even though he signed his threat to be a professional school shooter with his real first and last name. 2 months later, the future school shooter's family called the sheriff's office to report his weapons. The sheriff's office decides the family can deal with that. Later that month, the future school shooter's guardian called Palm Beach County deputies to say he's making more threats to shoot people. The very next day, another tipster warned the Broward Sheriff's Office that the future school shooter was collecting guns and is, quote, a school shooter in the making. About a month later, the FBI got a tip the future school shooter wants to, quote, kill people and may be planning to shoot up the school. The FBI dropped the ball on that. Then last month, he shot up the school, and the school resource officer was there, armed, but stayed outside as the shootings played out inside. State lawmakers say he was not effectively trained. What if he had engaged the school shooter?
It looks pretty obvious that either the culture or policies of that office were not up to handling a situation like this.
What if the FBI had followed its own rules and alerted its Miami field office when it received warnings? What if DCF would have taken more seriously the concerns of school counselors who requested the future school shooter be assessed for detainment under the Baker Act as early as 2016? What if just one of those actions led to a more vigilant response? Lives may have been saved without changing any laws.
We understand everything wasn't done perfectly. Deputies make mistakes, police officers make mistakes, we all make mistakes.
And while they investigate those mistakes that may have cost lives, they're also planning to raise the age limit for buying a rifle and extending the waiting period to cover long guns. And while all of this is playing out, Democrats and some Republicans say they also need to ban assault rifles. Well, we want to explain now why that will not be easy and is not currently happening. First, the gun lobby is fighting that tooth and nail, partly on the argument or fear that one type of ban would lead to others. And the gun lobby has a lot of clout because gun owners are high turnout and often single-issue voters. Second, there is no definitive definition of what an assault rifle even is. 24 years ago, Joe Biden came up with a definition for Congress.
I'm the guy that originally wrote the assault weapons ban that became law.
That federal law, which expired 14 years ago, banned semi-automatic firearms with certain characteristics of military weapons. That's what the government called assault weapons. They came up with charts to try to explain what assault weapons were, and gun makers simply made minor changes to evade the chart and definition. Plus, with loopholes in sales, it was easy for sellers to work around. In fact, our investigative team easily bought an AK-47 while the ban was still in place.
You guys licensed dealers? Or?
No charge.
So right or wrong, there is currently not enough support in Congress or the legislature to reinstate that ban. That brings us to the call to arm teachers and school staff. The president favors that, but says it's up to the states. Governor Scott says teachers should focus on teaching and law enforcement on law enforcement, but this is currently in the legislation working through the House and Senate. So here in Florida, some private school staffers are already armed through a program in Polk County. And in tonight's Spotlight, Vanessa Ruffes takes a closer look at how they get trained and how it compares to training for law enforcement.
Every time we would hear about another school shooting, another senseless death of a student that was defenseless, it leaves you to a place where you're heartbroken, but yet there's a part of you that's angry that someone wasn't there to protect them.
That's why Dr. Chris Owen is arming himself. He's the executive vice president of Southeastern University in Lakeland, and now a special deputy.
Protect and defend.
Sheriff Grady Judd gave him and a handful of other university staff those powers so they can carry guns on campus.
These teachers and coaches are charging in with no weapons and dying to protect children. Well, think about how the game changer will be if they have a gun and are well trained.
Shooters stand by.
All this is done through the Sentinel program. It's a collaboration that started more than a year ago between the Polk Sheriff's Office and Southeastern.
911 is an element that, we are going after law enforcement to come help us. This whole Sentinel program is law enforcement will already be here.
Sheriff Judd says these Sentinels aren't only given a gun, they're also given law enforcement skills.
Then we give them even more training than a Florida certified police officer has to have. So we're not just handing a gun to a teacher. We are providing a firearm for a very professional, well-trained person to keep your children alive.
We looked into that training for school Sentinels and compared it to full-time officers. FDLE tells us officers, as basic recruits, must have 80 hours of firearms training and 80 hours of defensive tactics. That's hand-to-hand combat and tactics to make sure somebody doesn't grab their gun in a fight. Sentinels receive 4 hours of defensive tactics, but their firearms training includes the same 80 hours as a basic recruit, plus an extra 16 hours of precision pistol training, 4 hours of shoot or don't shoot decision-making, and 8 hours of active shooter training. They're also required to spend 20 hours on deadly force education, meaning they learn when to legally step into a situation and when they can shoot. Altogether, a total of 132 hours of training. Sentinels must also pass a background check, a psychological exam, and retrain and retest 4 times a year. The guns on campus are kept in secure places, but for security reasons, the sheriff wouldn't say how or where. We did ask, can he guarantee all these checks and balances won't fail? Well, Judd says nothing is 100%, but
if we didn't do things because of civil liability, we'd never do anything. But I can tell you this, we'll accept the responsibility and the liability. I'm not going to allow anyone to have a gun that doesn't meet the highest standards and qualify appropriately.
No doubt, a big responsibility to bear for these Sentinels. And as a volunteer, Dr. Owen gets no extra money for it. That's not what's in his sights, though.
It was the first day of our training, and the lieutenant came in. It was the very first question he asked, or statement that he made: if you're not willing to put your life on the line for someone else, you're in the wrong room. And so I think each Sentinel searched their heart and made that decision that, yeah, our students are worth laying our lives on the line to protect them.
Now, the guns are approved by the sheriff's office and purchased by the university. Craig.
Now, how much does this cost Southeastern University?
Well, Well, the university says that they spend about a third of their security budget on this program. And while they wouldn't give specifics, Dr. Engel says that it is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
How many specifically do they have? How many Sentinels at Southeastern, and which other colleges, universities are looking at this, even before the legislature makes any changes?
Well, right now there are 8 Sentinels on Southeastern's campus, and except for Dr. Owen, they were all kept secret for security reasons, and we're actually told that the university is going to be doubling its number of Sentinels this fall. Meantime, Ybor International, which is a private university, just signed on to the program recently, and the sheriff says about 5 other private schools in the county have inquired about doing the same.
Great insight, Vanessa. Thank you. And please check out our YouTube channel. Search for Craig Patrick's Money, Power, and Politics and click subscribe. You'll also find an in-depth look at the plans in Washington, while our next guest is leading the plan in the State House. Please welcome Florida House Speaker Richard Corcoran. Speaker Corcoran, the governor is asking for around $500 million in his plan to help reduce mass shootings in school. Is there the will and a commitment in the legislature to find that much money?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we've already done so. If you look at the House and Senate proposals, I think we're going to end up somewhere between $400 and $500 million, because the House and Senate have at least 400 and the governor's at 500. We'll fall somewhere in that range, but we're absolutely, it's not the amount of money, it's not the policy, it's not the wording. Whatever it takes for us to make sure this never happens again, we're going to do it.
To find that money, the governor has said plan tax cuts, maybe some other things have to go. What in the end will be sacrificed in exchange for the additional commitment to funding for this plan?
You know, honestly, in the last 7.5 years, the governor and us have worked together to put more money in reserves than ever before. Last year, we put 200 recurring in reserves, the first time we've ever done that as a state. So we'll take some from the recurring reserves, we'll take some from projects, we'll take some from the tax cut package. We're going to do whatever it takes and fund fully this proposal that we think is a game changer in fixing and making sure that this incident never happens again for our school children.
What is your level of confidence that you'll get your package fully passed through the legislature? That includes the 3-day waiting period on the purchase of rifles and shotguns. It includes raising the age limits and the Baker Act reforms.
Oh, I think we're really close. I think we're close on the money. I think there's a complete agreement on the 21 age limit. I think we all have a very a common sense approach to looking at these individuals that come into the process with mental health issues and being able to hold them and take away their guns. And so I think we're really, really close on all of that stuff. I think there's no question we're going to get done. There's no question that we're going to pass a bill. And I should think now we're just working through the edges of where we all are.
Where do we stand in terms of the governor's call for a violent threat restraining order so that certain people can petition a court to have people who make violent threats have their guns taken away?
Yeah, I think some version of that is in all 3 bills. I mean, send out law enforcement, immediately Baker Act that individual, hold him for 72 hours, hold his guns for those 72 hours and take possession of them. And then if you need additional time to have him adjudicated as a mental health, we can go an additional 60 days, et cetera. And so I think all of us are doing that. The other big piece that we have, Craig, is we have a Marshall program, the first of its kind of all 50 states, that would apply to every single one of our school districts that say, hey, if you're a sworn law enforcement officer, if you have more training than our policemen and our deputies that are out on the road right now when it comes to guns and when it comes to a shooter situation, then we're going to allow you to carry a concealed weapon in the school system, and you can be a teacher and have that training. But once we have sworn law enforcement who are in the schools, these cowards aren't going to come in anymore. They won't come in at all. And even if they do, just like the situation down there, you're going to have a coach who's a marshal, and he's going to execute that guy the second he steps in the door.
Speaker Corcoran, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Craig.
Coming up, we'll show you how hackers targeted voting systems in Florida and look into a bombshell report that claims they succeeded. And we'll check in on the Rays' plan to move to Ybor City and asking sponsors to pay for much of it while the team is shedding payroll. The state of Illinois revealed that hackers compromised their voting systems before the 2016 election, and sources also told NBC News that Florida got hacked as well. As Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump were heading into election night, Florida election managers got this bogus email claiming to be from software vendor VR Systems. It urged them to click this link to update their software. But it was from a Gmail account not connected to the real VR Systems. And see how it misspelled the word modernization? Well, Pasco Supervisor of Elections Brian Corley said he knew this was a trick.
When elections begin the cycle, you don't have vendors send you updates. That was, I recall that specifically because early voting had already started in Florida. You wouldn't be getting an update to a manual. That just does not happen in our business. We would have gotten it months in advance.
Well, a federal contractor leaked documents showing how this was part of a cyber attack from the Russian military to penetrate our voting systems. Corley said it did not work in Pasco County.
There clearly appeared to be an attempt. It didn't work. My colleagues and I around the state and our staff followed the protocols to ensure that we had a good election, and I can 100% guarantee you that the election administration, as it relates to votes being tabulated, was 100% rock solid.
But according to a bombshell report this week from NBC News, some voting systems in Florida did get hacked, and so did voting systems in 6 other states. NBC based that on 3 senior intelligence sources. The report stresses Russia did not change any results from the election, but the sources fear the cyber attack may have been a dress rehearsal to try to alter results in future elections. And cybersecurity expert Steve Hasselback says they should be worried.
Once they have entrance now onto your network, onto your computer, now they can typically go and spread out virally around other machines and start to look and hunt for things.
At the very least, Russia could make us doubt our own election system, which appears to be part of its plan.
It really is a trust thing for America, not just for Florida. If they can get into those systems, they can instill a level of doubt.
On one hand, the Trump administration pushed back on the NBC report, calling it inaccurate and misleading. On the other hand, the president's head of the National Security Agency says we're not doing enough to prevent future attacks.
And I think in fairness, you can't say nothing's been done, but my point would be it hasn't been enough.
You said that President Trump has never ordered Cybercom to take any action to defend or thwart Russian attempts to meddle in the elections this fall. Is that correct?
I've never been given any specific direction to take additional steps outside my authority, and I have taken the steps within my authority, trying to be a good proactive commander.
And again, the reports note that the hackers targeted election websites and voter rolls, not the machines that actually tabulate the results. Well, tonight, we're also taking a closer look at the Rays' plan to get a new stadium in Ybor City. Attorney Ron Christaldi is one of 2 men responsible for raising much of the money, and he sat down with Evan Axelbank.
Yeah. Have the Rays said to you how much they're planning to contribute to a stadium?
Not yet.
They have not said.
I know that they are considering a significant amount of money, but I don't know what that is because we don't know what the stadium is going to cost yet.
The team, for the lack of a better term, appears to be dumping players. They're dumping salary. They've traded away many big-name Rays. Does that make your job more difficult?
Certainly, if I had Evan Longoria sitting next to me here, I think that would make my job a little bit easier. But I don't second guess what the Rays are doing. I think that they have assured me that they are working to put the best team on the field that they possibly can. And I feel that it's okay that fans are passionate and emotional about the trades and the building of the team. That's part of what baseball is. It's you feel that team is part of your family, and one of your family members gets sent to another team. It's disappointing.
So how do you sell that? How do you sell it?
Well, hopefully the team that they do put on the field will be very productive, and the players they put on the field, the fan base will build that same kind of emotional attachment to them, and that's what we'll be selling.
If they lose 100 games for the next 2 or 3 years,
makes it more difficult for sure. Hopefully that's not the case, but if they win the World Series next year, it makes it a lot easier.
Has the discord that we've seen between the Tampa mayor and between Commissioner Hagan and other figures involved in this, has that made it more difficult? The mayor himself has said we can't be singing from different song sheets. Has that discord had an impact?
I think no, and the premise of your question is that there is discord, and I will tell you in the discussions that I've been in, particularly where there have been representatives from the city or the county, which haven't been a lot of them, but what I see is a common effort to keep the Rays in Tampa Bay. When the camera's off, for instance, it is a willingness to work together and make things happen together.
Coming up, see who's up and who's down in this week's polls and how the president's remarks on gun control could shake things up in Washington. We have some interesting changes in the polls. According to Quinnipiac, Senator Marco Rubio is down. His approval rating has dropped to 38%. That's an all-time low for Rubio in Quinnipiac's tracking. Meanwhile, Governor Rick Scott is up to 49%. That's Quinnipiac's all-time high for him. But Scott still trails Bill Nelson in the race for U.S. Senate, presuming Governor Scott runs. Nelson leads Scott 46 to 42%. In the race for governor, meanwhile, right now, Democrats have an 8-point advantage. 45% say they want a Democrat to be their next governor in Florida. 37% want a Republican. But all the Democrats and Republicans in the race for governor have the same problem because most voters do not know who they are. That's why we're focusing on the candidates and putting all of them to the test. You'll find our interviews on our YouTube channel, and we've invited all of them back for more. Now, coming up, the president stunned fellow Republicans by calling for more gun control. We'll show you why and what happens next.
Some of you people are...
The president turned a lot of heads by calling for more gun control this week. Prediction: do not expect Congress to follow his lead. The best chance for getting anything relating to gun control passed in Congress might be improved, not expanded, background checks on a federal level. Meanwhile, a continuing focus on nuclear aggression from Russia and perhaps a pending trade war will be the focus this week. Next week on Money Power Politics.